DoD doesn't have an innovation problem, it has an innovation adoption problem. It's an adoption problem essential to diagnosing what's wrong and how to fix it. Because actually, DoD is incredibly innovative. DoD is super innovative, but make no mistake, DoD has real challenges adopting new technology.
Hey, this is Ryan Connell with the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, joined here today with Josh Marcuse. Josh, how you doing?
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Ryan.
Yeah, we were just we were talking right before we started. I was like, I don't know when we actually met, but it's been years. And thanks to you, Marina and DAU for kind of pulling us together for some project years ago, and we've been kind of tangentially connected since.
Well, Ryan, it's really a tribe of people, and we all keep track of each other. And I've admired you from afar for a long time, so I was really honored to be invited to chat with you today, and really appreciate all the stuff that you're doing at CDAO and the Pentagon and the bigger family.
Yeah, no, and seriously, likewise. I know. Even a couple of years ago, maybe last year, I was having an event in LA, and I was like, I need someone from Google help me. Well, let's just give a quick intro. Do you want to just give a self-introduction?
Absolutely. So I've been working at Google for almost 5 years now. The last 2 have been at Google Public Sector. That is a separate subsidiary of Google dedicated to public sector mission. So we're part of Google, but we're kind of a startup inside of Google, and that's really exciting. I worked for our CEO, Aaron Dehut. And prior to that, I worked in the Pentagon for close to 15 years. Most people know my last gig, if you will, which was starting and running the Defense Innovation Board. And that was really what got me interested in AI and got me connected to the mission of, first it was Maven, and then it was the Joint AI Center, Jake, and then it became CDAO, where you work now. So I feel a sense of real ownership and loyalty to and connection to the CDAO mission and family. So that's part of the reason I'm really stoked that you brought me here, because I care a lot that you guys that you get successful and that you win. It's really important, and I think it takes everyone. So I love the idea that you guys have a podcast now, because that's a great way to bring everyone into the conversation. That's pretty awesome. Podcasts were not as big of a thing in 2016 when the Defense Innovation Board started, but I feel like if I were doing the Defense Innovation Board over again, I would have loved to have started a podcast. So good on you. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, and it wasn't me inherited, right? It's kind of migrated a few times, but no, it's been a great avenue for us so far, and it's just understanding that everyone learns differently, and for some people, a podcast is a great answer. For some people, it's a textbook and lecture. For some people, it's give me a tool, let me play with it, and everyone has their own. But without kind of giving people those education options, you can't really holistically help provide that education mission. So, no, that's awesome, and I'm glad you mentioned the DIB effort. That's kind of what I know you as like the innovation guy, like that's kind of what the bubble that you have in my memory space, right? So do you want to kind of just like kick off, is there a Josh Marcuse definition of innovation, or like what does that mean to you?
For me, I think it's a novel way of solving a mission problem. And the novelty of it is sort of built into the etymology of the word innovate. It is, you can't separate newness from innovation, but it is not technology. And I think a lot of people's definition of innovation, or at least what they think in their mind, is innovation is new tech. And I don't think that's true. I really think that innovation is about changing behavior, changing mindset, changing the way mission is accomplished by doing new things. And, technology is a big piece of that. Of course, working at Google, we work on technology every day. But technology by itself does not create value for users. And you can have a new technology that creates no new value. Innovation is about creating new value with a new way to solve it.
No, that makes sense. I don't have a readily available definition by my perspective, but it always felt like it's something that isn't the status quo, right? Whether that's a process or, just a new way of looking at something. So no, I appreciate that. And
also, I know we're going to talk about commercial technology, dual use technology and stuff like that later, but I think what's really important also to understand is there's new to the world and there's new to the country. And there's a lot of things that are being created in Silicon Valley companies or AI companies that are genuinely new to the world. But then there's also a lot of these things in the category of dual use technology that may not be entirely new to the world, but are new to a DoD mission or new to an agency. And that is also innovation or innovative or modernization. And it is often the case that it may be taking something that is old, but using it in a new way. And that makes it innovative because it's about using something in a new context. And so, one of the things that influenced my thinking the most is this idea of the innovation adoption curve. And, whether, it's the original or Everett Rogers or it's Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore, this idea of a curve is really influential to how I thought about what we are trying to do together in the DoD mission space, government, industry, everyone working together. It's really about climbing that curve and thinking about each individual human user and where they are in their journey. Do they see themselves as an innovator, as an early adopter, as early majority, as late majority, and we can talk about that more because again, I think it's really useful in thinking about how you are bringing AI to mission in DoD at CDAO, and who are your different stakeholders and where are they, and how do you approach each of the stakeholders in a way that's right for them and their mission and that's really how we think about it. But that led us to what became in many ways the catchphrase of the Defense Innovation Board in that era, 2016 through 2020, which was DoD doesn't have an innovation problem, it has an innovation adoption problem. And that concept that it's an adoption problem is central to diagnosing what's wrong and how to fix it. Because actually, DoD is incredibly innovative. Decades of leaders across multiple segments, many technology areas, a frontier, investing billions in R&D and all of these things. So I'm going to credit to Bob Work, who really shaped my thinking on this. He's super passionate about defeating the claim that DoD is not innovative. DoD is super innovative, but make no mistake, DoD has real challenges adopting new technology. And so when you think about building AI versus adopting it, totally different problem space, different techniques. And so I think of myself as I'm not a technologist, I'm not a coder, I'm not a software developer, I'm not a data scientist. I'm a student of human conditioning, right? I'm an organizational change guy. And so that's why I feel like I was able to be helppful. In some cases, failed a lot, but in the cases where I was successful, it was not about, we've invented a new product or we purchased a new existing product. It is more to do with we are helping leaders and organizations climb the innovation adoption curve, harvesting what exists and applying it to a new context, to mission, to be successful. And that's what I hope your listeners are thinking about. Either where am I on the adoption curve relative to this mission or this technology? Or if I am a change agent, if I'm leading change, how do I be the Sherpa that helps carry my boss on this mission or these users up this mountain and gets them to a place that's better than where I found?
Yeah, I love that you just blew this open. We had some talking points, and we're already away from it. No, it's great. No, it's great. So you're good because you got me going in my brain, and I want to ask you, how do we get there? And I have 2 points, and one is the law of diffusion of innovation, right? You have the standard deviations and acquisition hat, right? We have 180,000 acquisition professionals in DoD. For us to just get that first, where you get to the point where you have the tipping point and you actually start talking about adoption, 16% somewhere of that, right? So you need 30 something thousand people on board doing the thing, whether it's a new way to do OTAs or whether it's a iterative contracting, for the purpose of small iterative contracting and scaling and learning, whatever that thing is that you're trying to get from the acquisition standpoint. I'm where do I go? I don't have 30,000 listeners here as Defense Mavericks. I don't have 30,000 LinkedIn followers. I don't have an email listserv with 30,000 people. The reach is so hard for an individual. And then, to your point earlier, is it the tribe, is it the network? How do we get there? So I'll stop. That's point one, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
So listen, this is the talk I give, right? Is I talk to a lot of people who maybe have in their hearts a lot of passion for making change, right? That those, we were talking about the tribe. Like that's my tribe. Those are my people. Those are the people that I seek out. And a lot of them are frustrated. They're burned out, right? I mean, we can go talk about culture if you want later. I mean, there's a big emotional toll that these people experience when they're carrying the burden on their back of trying to move this organization, and they feel the urgency and they feel the back pressure, and that creates conflict for them. So a lot of those people, are coming to me saying about all the fear and anxiety they have about the pushback. And what I try to point out to them is that they're focusing on that 15%, let's say, that are the laggards on the opposite end of the curve from no. And that's normal human behavior, to be afraid of that antagonism or that conflict. And instead of focusing on those laggards, I encourage them to focus on those early adopters. There's an equal number of them, but we over-focus perhaps and over-index on the people that are going to say no, instead of looking for the people that are going to say yeah, or yet if, or maybe how would we, right? And I think that is really powerful. So what I would say is, you're thinking about your acquisition professionals. We don't need 75 out of 100 of the acquisition professionals that we may meet to all be the ones trying to drive a new way of working. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of things that are going to exist in the acquisition ecosystem that are not about embracing an additional measure of risk or being more experimental, but they're really about driving efficiency, because these are maybe not 0 to 1 motions. Maybe these are 1 to many motions. Maybe we've moved into a different stage where we are talking about increasing execution and we want to increase throughput. We are more worried about cost, schedule, and performance. There's a lot of places where the mindset is the right mindset. But we want to encourage those acquisition professionals that have that mindset to work on those programs that are more mature, where maybe it is about not inventing a new thing, but scaling production of that thing. You think of where we are in Ukraine right now. So much of our challenge is not inventing new counter UAS systems. It's actually just scaling the manufacture of an existing, commodity. And for that, like, the acquisition professional you need there is someone that is going to use the toolkit of, lean manufacturing, not the toolkit of a lean startup. And that's okay. Like, we need those people. They are crucial. We're not at war with them, internally. They're not the enemy. They're using their skills and their mindset, their values, to be protectors of the public interest. But maybe, or the programs that your listeners are interested in, it is actually, I need people that are much more comfortable with some calculated and measured risk taking. They're much more comfortable with far tailoring, or they're comfortable with OTAs, or they are more comfortable with a new type of contract vehicle that they haven't tried before, and they're willing to be experiment. And I don't need 100 of those. I need 15 of the 100 acquisition professionals to be of that mindset. And so when I've talked to leaders about reforming the acquisition workforce, I'm not asking them to change all 150,000 people that go through DAU. But what I do want is to be like, okay, we need to grow the population of people from 10% to 20% or 20% to 30% that are going to do the new things in the new ways. And we want to make them feel like they have permission, psychological safety, backing, top cover sponsorship to do the new things. Because it's not that we want all of DoD to be super risk acceptant about every program. We're just trying to move it a bit. That's why I'm so pleased, for example, that DIU got the huge budget increase. Because the goal was never that DIU should have 40% of the acquisition budget, but it needed to be that it had more than 0.001%.
Right.
So now that we're moving into, they have a $1 billion war chest, we're just adjusting the risk rheostat to the right place. We're giving them enough, or we're giving CDAO enough. to be able to represent that 15 or 20% that is going to do that more experimental work. And that doesn't mean that we're going to eliminate everything else. It just means that we need to get the balance right. And that's what I tell people. So when you figure out who you are, what's your goal, where do you fit, where is your program, and position yourself in the right place. And I think that I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. I don't think DoD has gotten it right. I think we need to lean more into being more experimental, more risk, but it's not a 0%, 1%. It's it's 80-20, it's 70-30. It's about getting the balance right. And what I think is really important about organizational changes like creating a DIU or a CDAO or Office of Strategic Capital, all those sorts of things, is that those institutional structures help create the guideline for where you want those risk boundaries to be, right? You need organizations, whether they're in industry or you're in government or anywhere else, you need organizations that are optimizing for efficiency. And you need organizations that are optimizing for experimentation. And when you apply an efficiency optimization mindset to an experimentation optimization organization, that's where you get terrible failures and you get frustrations and you get setbacks and you get disappointments. And so it's understanding what type of organization am I and getting the balance right. And, we have, Clayton Christensen and all of those researchers with decades of experience telling us that whether you're a public sector organization or a private sector organization, all big organizations that have to renew themselves have to have small teams that work differently and have a different culture. And then they have to have a mechanism to inject the best ideas and scale them. And the strategies for experimentation and the strategies for scaling are not the same. So when, Congress is inspecting what DoD is doing, it has to know what type of metrics should I be applying to this kind of organization. When leaders, and generals, are looking at your organization, they have to ask themselves, what is the metric that I should be applying here? And don't apply a scaling metric to a discovery organization. You have to, or if your goal is scaling, don't apply the wrong metric. You got to understand what is the nature of the fight that I'm in with the organizational change that I'm seeking. And then at the Secretary of Defense level, or at the R&E level, it's or at the CDAO level, it's about balancing that portfolio. Because for CDAO, you have to have programs that are designed for scaling, and you have to have programs that are designed for trying new things. And you got to get the balance right.
Sure, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think you answered actually most of my second point that I was going to bring up, which was, I think it was just yesterday. Right. So we have a small little landing page where we have some experimental AI tools for the purposes of acquisition. And one of them is market research, right? So you can kind of, in your own words, type in a problem statement. It'll perform a whole bunch of market research and actually use an LLM to generate the report for you. And so I showed an organization the tool, and a couple of days had gone by and they kind of came back and said like, hey, this is such an awesome product. But my organization is telling me, like my leadership is telling me that I can't use it until it's policy that I should use it. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, but like, you're doing market research today and you're using Google and a whole bunch of other tools that aren't written anywhere in policy. So like, is it because it's AI? Like what makes it different? And I'm curious. So like, I liked how you talked about, because it is a bell curve and there is an equal number of people that are going to say no as there is that are going to say yes without question. Like, how do I want to say this? If you're me, do you just say, okay, you're a no, I'm not going to focus my energy on trying to convince you. Like, let me just go find more yeses. Or do I try to convince the no's to be yeses? I guess is kind of the pointed question.
Yeah, that's the heart of it. So my argument, and I don't think it's an uncontroversial argument, but this is my argument, is that you should focus on moving everyone to the category to their right. Like, you want to help the innovators become early adopters, right? You want to help the early adopters support the early majority, right? You want the early majority to help create demand and pull for the late majority, and that's when you achieve organizational tipping.
Yeah.
And this is really important. And think of a concept like a program like Advana, right? Advana is not a new LLM. Advana is existing proven tools that you are trying to get wider set of organizations to adopt modern data science tools to have access to better insight. And so that is not something that I would imagine is in the portfolio, the CDAO portfolio of flyaway bets, right? That's not crazy LLM stuff, right? This is the like, hey, math works, software works, data science works. We know it. We want to bring the department into a more mature approach to using data and making data available for mission and increasing the velocity and accuracy of insight, that kind of thing, right? Better visualization tools. And so, you're trying to help get more people to do that. So like, I would not recommend spending all of your energy fighting the laggards on the opposite end of the adoption curve to try to get people that are adamant that they don't want it, right, to come over to your side. I think instead I would focus on, someone that you think is open to evidence that it works and providing them with evidence that it works and winning them over, showing them value. When the folks that are in the persona mindset of late majority are seeing a critical mass of early majority people that they don't associate with having a mindset that is vastly different from their own, but they identify with them as, common sense, hardworking, loyal public servants that are not taking unrealistic risks experimenting with new technology, but people they see are colleagues getting the job done. When they see those people getting the job done with new market research tools, then they are going to be inclined to allow their organizations to use those market research tools. So what I love to see is stoking a flame of inter-service rivalry, right? If the Navy acquisition professionals in this hypothetical example are the ones that are comfortable using new tools for market research and using LLMs to generate better market research reports that are, better, faster, cheaper, more readable, more accessible, maybe the Army or the Air Force or that other group that's doing something comparable is going to see that. Yeah. And as a promoter of the new technology, what I'm looking for is a diffusion pathway. So one of our favorite examples in the early days of DIU on predictive maintenance we saw as being a great diffusion pathway was, hey, lots of services use the Black Hawk helicopter platform. So can we use that as a way to introduce predictive maintenance tools? Because maybe it's easier for different, PEOs that are on a common platform in a UH-60 to be able to do that. And so, that was an example, right, of a way of being like, hey, I want to show that I can cross the valley of death and I can get early adopters, and the early adopters can get more adopters, and they can get more adopters, and you have a diffusion pathway in mind. I think what critics rightfully point out is that sometimes we do experimentation without a diffusion pathway in mind, and that tends to become the AI hobby projects that maybe we don't see as much in 2025, but we certainly saw plenty of in 18, 19, 2020 timeframe, where they're like, hey, you produced a cool widget, but it doesn't scale. And, that's because, maybe we were trying to get from 0 to 1 and we didn't have a theory of change for getting from 1 to many. But now I think we're much, much more mature. I think DoD is much, much more mature and sophisticated about that today. So, from our perspective, what we would like to see, and I think CDAO can play a big part of it, is platform that enable that curve, right? So you build a whole infrastructure platform that's shared, so it's secure and it's made more widely available and it's more cost efficient, and then organizations can create applications on that common data platform. And you're taking the vendor lock-in and those sources of friction and those barriers out. You're putting interfaces in. Everything is an API call, and you're creating an ecosystem that is designed to have many different adoption pathways. And that's what I think at least the initial vision, if you go back to the early days when we were like pitching the Jake for the first time, right? The idea is that, we are trying to create a diffusion path a platform for diffusion, a platform for adoption to help more people solve problems with these newer technologies at wider scale. And that was the original plan. I mean, honestly, if you go back to when we first pitched Jedi, which became JWCC, that was the idea. We're like, we want to make it easier for more people to be on their own adoption curve for cloud, because there's no way to get to AI without cloud. And if cloud is to be homespun by every organization, it's going to take everyone a really long time to get there. You're going to end up with a really messy, ugly, heterogeneous platform. There's going to be a lot of cybersecurity vulnerabilities in that. So let's create a service for all, the common platform that allows people to be where they are on their journey. And I think that is a huge aspect of what makes a company like Google a great AI company, is that our internal tooling, platform, infrastructure, data access is really optimized to super empower individual developers.
Sure.
So I think CDAO has a huge promise potential to operate a similar strategy inside DoD. You guys can be the provider of amazing platforms, tooling, data sets, acquisition vehicles, right? The building block of creating value with AI that a lot of people can use. You don't need to create that AI application for everyone, but you can create that platform building block, the mindset, the expertise, the skills that help a lot of different people in DoD flying their curve, right? Their curve, whatever that is. And to do it with a more widely available set of proven and secure commercial tools. I think one of the things that rightfully concern critics of AI is, are there vulnerabilities there? Or are those people not making the decisions and they're going to be wasting taxpayer dollars? And so I think you guys are able to raise the floor for everyone by creating a certain common foundation of proven, tested, secured, available, cost-efficient platforms, contract vehicles, guidance, like all the incredible work you guys have done with responsible AI and then putting out a toolkit. You set a great floor of this is good guidance on how to do this responsibly. And what I hate to hear, though, is in your anecdote is someone being like, well, I haven't been given a specific policy telling me to do this, so I can't do it.
Right.
That I think is disappointing. I don't think whoever's saying that, I don't think they're reading the room, if you will, and seeing how the context has shifted.
Sure.
I think there's clearly support for people adopting these tools in order to be competitive against pacing threats. And so, if someone is saying that, I hope they stop.
Yeah. No, it's good. And we talked so much here about. I think you said basically we don't have an innovation problem, we have an innovation adoption problem. I'm curious, because you kind of played a couple roles here in your career, like is that adoption problem, that we'll call it, is that due to the size of DoD being this incredibly large organization, or is there something different between public-private that is worth exploring? Curious what your thoughts are there.
I think a big piece of it, Ryan, is we're not as nuanced in our understanding of risk as I think that we need to be. One of the things that I love about the Department of Defense, and that I love about the people who work at the Department of Defense, and I loved about my time as a public servant, is that the stakes are so high. And you're working with people that have signed up for enormous sacrifices and personal risk. And that really is a sacred responsibility. And it's different than the commercial world. This is not food delivery apps. I mean, this is real stuff. And there are situations where it is life and death. But that doesn't mean that all situations are life and death. It doesn't mean that in every case people are shooting at you. And, this attitude of, the regulations are written in blood, right? Or the Rickover manual, that attitude is anchored in the reality that there are situations in our world in defense. There are situations where it is life and death. But then we export that set of values and that mindset into all kinds of contexts where that does not belong. And in doing that, even though it comes from a place of patriotism, of loyalty, of commitment, of honestly, of caretaking, of wanting to take care of your comrades, of wanting to protect people, protect taxpayer dollars, that comes from this noble protected instinct. But what it misses is that the risk of omission is often as severe as the risk of commission. The things that we fail to do can hurt us every bit as much as the things that we choose to do. And the failure to move forward is the same thing as falling behind. And so, we often had a lot of conversations about risk tolerance and the risk of not leaning in when we needed to lean in because we took the wrong context around risk. And we put ourselves in a position where we were actually putting men and women in harm's way, putting mission at risk, putting people at risk because we were unwilling to take small risks on people. And so, it's an extreme version of this, but I described it mindset. It's not risk reduction, it's risk displacement. And in the wrong direction. You're actually shipping risk from the cubicle to the foxhole. We're taking risk of, I don't want to get criticized, or I don't want to get written up, or I don't want to even get investigated. And we're taking that risk and we're actually creating a new risk that actually missions fail and people are harmed. And so we have to do a serious readjustment of what we think is risky today. And in the generative AI era, in this agentic AI era, in this era of, near pure competition or great power competition, we have to really adjust the risk assessment and appreciate that today we need to approach the mission of adopting new technology and scaling the technologies that work as if our life depended on it, instead of the reverse. And that's really true. And so, I think that we have to look at a lot of things, particularly, acquisition reform, budget reform, the way in which we put the POM together, the way in which we experiment in new technology, particularly the way that we do, testing and evaluation, and ask ourselves, are we doing this in the appropriate risk-adjusted way for the context that we are in? One of the people who inspired me the most is Alexis Connell, who's she and I worked together when she was at USAID as the Chief Innovation Officer. We worked together, came to Google for a while, she's back now at AFRL. I'm doing innovation at AFRL, and she had one of these bracelets made that said, would we do this in war? And it is inspiring to me that she's asking that question, because that is there's such a pithy and trenchant way of asking this question, which is, are we operating as if we are in theater, or are we operating as if we are in garrison? And, I think there's so many situations where we are behaving as if there's not a sense of urgency and a risk of not acting, when in reality, there is now an enormous risk of not acting. And, in bio, in quantum, in AI, in these splashy technologies, it's easy to see headlines that says, the race is on. But we have to move that all the way back to the precursor technologies and understand it's actually in cloud and in zero trust and in data that are the precursor foundational technologies of AI. So when you say, well, we need to embrace risk in AI adoption, but I don't want to accept any risk in cloud adoption, that is a completely ahistoric, illogical, irrational approach. The biggest threat that I see to AI adoption right now is the way we do in authority to operate. It's accreditation and ATO. We can't adopt commercial SaaS at the speed of relevance because we have a really obsolete way of thinking about cybersecurity today. And so we have, we're looking at hypersonics and AI and these things and being like, well, we're losing that competition, but not tracing it all the way back to part of the source, which is we do ATO really badly today. We could be much faster. We We have great white papers. Everyone agrees on the definition of the problem. We have great white papers about how we would do ATO reciprocity and continuous ATO, but we're not leaning forward there. Well, guess what? You know how you want to get ahead of hypersonic competition? Better modeling, right? Better availability of high performance compute in the cloud. How would you get to that? Well, you need to reform the ATO process to get there. So if you walk it all the way back, you'll see that there's a lot of things in the background that look like they're mundane sources of friction that are not mundane. They are sources of systemic risk. So, I would love to see us make real progress on making, cloud readily available, multi-cloud readily available, zero trust, the law of the land fully adopted, get ATO reciprocity right, super empower PEOs to have more flexible funding, to do more spin-in technology, to get more incremental capability into existing platforms, not new starts, but really stretching the capability envelope of the platforms that exist, pushing the envelope there. Those are the kinds of things that over time add up to accelerating change and positive adoption. And then, that changes the way you think about risk completely. I think the biggest risks we face are falling behind in great power competition. That is not just super flashy SAP programs about faith and the new frontier, right? That is also the building block of how hard it is to get things done in your organization. And if it's super, super hard to get things done in the organization, that has this effect of just, slowing everything down, creating friction in places that doesn't need it. And that may not be the biggest deal on that 50% of the innovation adoption curve that is the late majority in people that are just trying to drive, incremental gains in execution. Maybe it's acceptable there. But for the people that are really trying to move something that has been proven to work to be available to 10 or 20 or 30% more of the workforce, for them, that added friction can be the difference between success and failure, between adoption and the missed opportunity. And that creates a ton of risk and a lot of technical debt. And so again, we ask ourselves, what is risky and what is not risky? I would say operating an organization with an enormous amount of accumulated technical debt and a really outdated attitude about cybersecurity, and perhaps a workforce that's not fully tooled for the future, I see a huge amount of risk there, right? Maybe an amount of risk that is equal to some of the things that seem on the surface to be more risky, what if the system hallucinates? I'm sorry, there is a danger the system may hallucinate, but there's also a huge danger to having an acquisition program that takes 7 years to deliver value because you are requiring everyone to do operational tests and evaluation with pencils and clipboards, right? That is also risky.
Yeah, very, very profound. So I appreciate that. You got my brain spinning, and I wish we could keep this conversation going for hours, but got to kind of wrap here, but I do want to give you an opportunity. I'll leave it to you which one you prefer to hit. If you want to do King for a Day, here's the change I drive, or if you just have something kind of overarching you want to leave the listeners, either or, I'll let you kind of close it out from there.
I think we've talked a lot about culture. We've talked a lot about risk and those things. But I think one of the things that I also just care so deeply about is talent management and about the people. It's so easy for people to say, oh, well, we can't get it done because culture. But every leader in the organization has an opportunity to create an environment in her organization or in his organization that is safe for people to challenge conventional wisdom and to try new things. Not safe to lower standards, not safe to do dumb things. We all know that. We can see that. We can recognize that. But to create a climate where if you are a leader who is lucky enough to be blessed to have an innovator or early adopter in your command, to create the incentives for our leaders to protect those people and nurture them and care for them. And what I was exposed to time and time again at my time in DoD was those remarkable individuals who hold in their hands our future, our ability to adopt new technology, our ability to adapt, to overcome. And instead of giving them a space to make their unique contribution to mission, they were relegated to being, pushed back into a box because they were different. And I think that is a huge danger. One of the things that I think is so interesting about our history and about our culture is that when we think about who our heroes are, right, they are the people that challenge conventional wisdom, Doolittle and Shriver and Rickover. And your podcast is called Defense Mavericks for a reason. We love those people's stories. And when we talk about how, our proudest moment as the military was World War II, I believe, right? And we think about what made us special. And so many historians have said, and so many of our leaders have embraced the idea that there's something about the American character that is innately entrepreneurial, that is this kind of rugged, individualistic, renegade, frontier attitude that is part of how we lionize the American consciousness. And we can connect these dots between this attitude that goes back to the Revolutionary War and the frontier and all of the growth of American history and the nature of American character. And we connect it to this idea of that we won World War II because of the non-commissioned officer and because of the ability of any well-trained officer to be a leader, of mission command, of the ability to step in and rise to the level of the situation and to be a kind of entrepreneurial, independent leader. And so we have this attitude that we won the Cold War by being entrepreneurial, by out-innovating the Soviets and their planned economy and their massive industrial scale. And so we have this notion that it is American ingenuity and individualism and entrepreneurship that is our secret weapon in great power competition. And yet, if you believe that about us, why do we not allow those unique men and women to give their gift of their talent and their ability and their creativity and their uniqueness to national security? It goes against the whole ethos of what we believe about ourselves and our pinnacle of achievement. And so culture is not about Silicon Valley, move fast, break things, putting bunny ears on photos. That's not what Silicon Valley is about. Silicon Valley as an ethos is about embracing America's entrepreneurial spirit. And my exhortation in the military is we need to embrace the entrepreneurial spirit of America inside of the military. It is not a new thing. It's an old thing. It goes back to our roots. It's not something that's scary. It's something that we're proud of and we're confident in. And it's the stories that we've told and the medals that we've awarded. And part of our history and part of our mythology has always been celebrating these renegade officers, the ones that were court-martialed, right? Boyd, and others. And now in retrospect, we elevate them. And so my challenge to you and everyone and all your listeners is we have to grow a generation of those leaders and not make them fight us to contribute to the mission. We need to empower them to contribute to the mission. And I think it's reframing that as not as a culture war, but as a going back to our roots of acknowledging what made us great. And the things that made us great in winning World War II and winning the Cold War are the same things that we will need to win this new era of great power competition. And instead of forcing our men and women to have the extra burden on their back, we need to lift them up and give them a pedestal and a ladder and help them climb. And I think that is the thing that I care the most about. And I hope that we look for concrete ways to make it easier for them to do that instead of all of the ways in which we make it hard.
Yeah, that is a mic drop closing statement. So I really appreciate that, Josh. Hey, thanks for being on today. This was a great conversation. I just enjoyed interacting, but mostly listening. I got a lot of notes, so I'm going to go do some more brain thoughts on everything you said. So thanks again for being on.
No, then Ryan, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the work that you do and everything that CDAO does. I couldn't be more excited about what the year has in store for you guys. It's going to be an amazing 2025.
Heck yeah. All right.